Hi. Okay, so we're gonna be changing up a recipe for cinnamon rolls, and we're gonna be making 4 different batches. So, I need to wash my hands first. So, I'll be back. Okay, we're back. Hands washed, clean, and apron on. So, let's start making the cinnamon rolls. First, okay, so here I am measuring my flour, and I am spooning and leveling in order to get the best measurement of the flour. You can use a scale for your flour to get the best results in order to get an exact measurement. However, I am just spooning and leveling my flour. Do not scoop your flour using the measuring cup, as it can just compress and give you more flour than you actually needed. And here I am just sifting my flour in order to remove any clumps or any unwanted things that we do not want in our final product. Now, for the original recipe, we will use 2 cups, 2 3/4 cup of flour. Then we will use 1 packet of instant yeast. We will use half a teaspoon of salt, and we will mix those together and incorporate those into the dry ingredients, as well as half a cup of sugar. Here I am incorporating them all together, and I am heavily mixing them together in order to ensure that all of the dry ingredients are well mixed properly. As it will take a little bit of time since I quadrupled the recipe, but make sure you incorporate all your dry ingredients together properly. Now, I'm doing one more final stir before I get the butter, milk, and water mixture ready to add to the dry ingredients. Here is the milk, water, and butter. I quadrupled the recipe, but you only need 3 tablespoons of butter. And just look at the recipe. Just add those to the bowl, and for the original recipe, you can add it for 30-second increments and wait until melted, and that should be fine. After your mixture is ready to go, after the butter's all the way melted and you mix it together and stir it and the increments are ready, you should set it aside. Now, for me, I did 1-minute increments for 5 minutes total, and it was perfectly fine for me. However, the best thing to do is 30-second increments. That has always worked well. Now, for the original recipe, you only need 1 egg. However, I am using 4 because, again, I quadrupled the recipe. Now, I've always had a fear of cracking eggs. However, I've learned that just slamming the egg on the counter creates a little opening, and I just push and open the eggs, and it's very simple. Now, here I am just adding the eggs to the bowl, as adding eggs to a separate bowl allows you to get any unwanted eggshells or dirt out of the bowl before you add it and incorporate it into the dry ingredients. Now I am cleaning up my station and getting ready to add the wet ingredients to the dry ingredients. Now, as always, I always wash my hands throughout this video, which you should always do when baking, and touching and changing what you're touching. Now, here I am adding the hot but not scalding butter, milk, and water mixture together, and I'm incorporating it slowly mixing it along with the egg or eggs, as I quadrupled the recipe. Now, it will be a workout, But if you have a stand mixer, you can use your stand mixer and knead the dough with the dough hook attachment on stir or the second speed. Now I'm scraping all of the dough off because I got really tired at this point and I just really wanted to get it finished. So I'm scraping all the dough off and I'm going to add it to my stand mixer in order to hopefully incorporate the dough a lot faster and a lot more easily than just with a wooden spoon. Now, here's the thing. If you do not have a dough mixer, if you do not have a stand mixer with a dough hook or whatever, that is perfectly fine. You can use a spatula and you can use a wooden spoon to incorporate and mix the dough first, and then you can knead the dough by hand, but make sure you use lightly floured hands. And in this video, I use a dough scraper, a food scraper, and it's really helpful. It was really helpful with kneading, as I've never kneaded before, and I'm not really good at kneading, but the dough really came off the countertop with the dough and the food scraper. I'm just kneading the dough as it is very sticky, and I'm just adding some flour to the countertop to prevent it from getting stuck. But as you can see, I failed miserably and the dough got stuck. But I did not give up, and I just kept on scraping and yes. But here, I'm just continuing to fail, but it's all right. But yes, when your mixtures or your dough is already mixed, make sure you knead it properly, and you should have a nice formed dough, not sticky and wet like this one. Your dough should be perfect and it should not be too dry, and if it is wet and sticky like mine, make sure you add a small bit, like a tablespoon at a time, of flour and slowly or knead it together, and do not knead more than 8 minutes at a time. So let's say once I hit the 8-minute mark, I let my dough rest and let it rest, because it would become all stiff and overworked, and you do not want to overwork your dough. That is a big no. The after product will become tough and it will just not taste right. So here I am struggling again with the dough, but we prevailed. It's okay. I was really trying hard. So I had the idea of using the food scraper to scrape off all of the dough off of my hand, but as you can see, it didn't work that well, and the food scraper kept on getting stuck into the dough. But it is okay, because we all make mistakes, and baking is all about learning from your mistakes. Now, while I am on the subject of baking, I really love my apron. I got it from a shop it was near Myrtle Beach. It was Hollywood something, but it was a shop, and it's an apron that on the apron is what I always ask for: butter. Butter is literally liquid gold for me. I use it a lot in baking, and I always need it. So I just loved the apron. But as you can see here, I'm slowly adding just small bits of flour and incorporating it into the dough, and I'm doing the window test, but as you can see, the dough is not kneaded properly and thoroughly throughout the thing, as it broke easily and came apart very fast. So I'm just scraping and kneading and scraping continuously until the dough gets off and stays within itself and not just getting stuck to my hands in the countertop. I was struggling, as you can see throughout the video. I'm trying everything I can, from wrapping it and twisting it in my hands to doing fancy little moves that I have no idea what I'm doing. But it didn't work. It just stuck to my hand and I made it worse. But I tried, and like I said, it's all about learning from your mistakes. But I apologize from the lighting issues, going dark and bright and light, dark and bright. It's from the background, from the bright light and me moving. I can't help it, But like I said, baking is all about having fun, and as long as you have fun, that's what really matters. So here I had the idea of just scraping up all the dough and just put it back into the bowl and wash my hands and try to make it back in the mixer. Yeah, as you can see, I instantly regretted that. As the dough is all over my hands and struggle getting it off my hands. I had to go outside and spray my hands off because the dough was just stuck and it wasn't getting off. And the food scraper was very, that part, the food scraper that I'm using currently right there in the video was sharp, had some sharp pieces on it, and I was just cutting my hand open, and that was just not a good feeling. But yeah, like I said, we all make mistakes, and it's just best to learn from them. Yes, it takes me a little bit of a good while to get all of the dough off. Like I said, it was very hard to get off of my hands. Eventually I just figure out that I can't just get all of it off, so I just take whatever I can and just put it in the bowl and I try every method, rubbing my hands together, but just whatever. I can't even pause the video for that because my hands had dough all over them, so I'd use my elbow, which was pretty embarrassing, and I apologize for that. But like I said, throughout the video, I wash my hands thoroughly every time I change through different tasks. Hi. Okay, we're back. Here I already have the dough fixed. I came back, I let it rise, it fixed itself. It's still sticky, but it's not as bad. And I went ahead and divided it in the 4 sections that I needed. You need it for the singular one. You need a 14 by 8 rectangle, 14 length, 8 width, 8 inch width, 14 inch length. And here I'm just talking about the process of the dough that I did, and what I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the softened butter to each of the rectangles, and I'm going to add the different cinnamon sugar mixtures to each of the rectangles. Now I made 4 different cinnamon sugar mixtures. 2 I made were seasonal mixtures. One of them had, the seasonal mixture had nutmeg, and it had allspice, cloves, ginger, and cinnamon. And I substituted that. I used that as, the recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of cinnamon, and I just used 1 tablespoon of that cinnamon seasonal mixture for 2 of the sections. And then the other 2 sections I used regular cinnamon, and one of the sections had white cane sugar, and the other section had brown sugar. I did that for both of these sections. What I do is for each section, you need 3 tablespoons of softened butter. So you go ahead and cut up the butter for each if you're using multiple, then you'll need multiple. You'll need more than 3 tablespoons, obviously. But what I do, which you should avoid doing, is using your hands to rub the butter all over there. That was not a good thing. I promise you, I wash my hands throughout the video every time to avoid germs and cross-contamination and everything. I wash the counter. Everything is clean. But what I did was I grabbed the 3 tablespoons of butter and I melt it in my hands more, and I squeeze it and rub it on my hands, and then I just incorporate it throughout the dough. You can do that, but I don't recommend it, as it gets messy and all the butter just isn't on there. It's on your hands. What I recommend, a smart thing to do, is mix your 3 tablespoons of room temperature butter, softened butter, with your cinnamon sugar mixture, or whatever filling you're using, and mix that together, and it'll create a paste. And you can spread that paste on your dough. Now, this dough that I made, I should have added more flour, but it is a lot more sticky and wet, so the butter was harder to rub on there. But if you did it properly, you should be able to use a butter knife or an offset spatula and just spread the butter throughout the dough. But make sure you incorporate and spread all of the butter and the spread on the dough, and get it on all the corners, because when you roll them up, if you have like a corner or a sliver that doesn't have it on there, you might have a cinnamon roll with no cinnamon, just a roll. So I recommend spreading, making a cinnamon sugar spread, essentially, and just make sure you rub it all in throughout the dough mixture. So what I'm doing here is I went ahead and had all of my cinnamon sugar mixtures together, and I am sprinkling all of the mixtures on the dough with the butter on them. I pinch it up and I just sprinkle it throughout, but you want to make sure, if you're doing my method, make sure you get it on all of it. You can put it in your hand and open up, spread your fingers a little bit and let it fall. You can do whatever you want to, but make sure you get the cinnamon sugar mixture all the way throughout the entire dough, because you want it, because in the end we're going to roll it up and we're going to cut it. Here I'm finishing up the mixture, and I'm making sure I don't get it on any of my other ones, as I do not want to ruin and cross-contaminate my different mixtures. I'm finishing up and emptying the bowl and making sure I use every last piece of cinnamon and sugar. Okay, now I cut off and I finished all of my mixtures and they're all added. So now what we're going to do is we are going to roll the dough up into cinnamon rolls, since they are cinnamon rolls. Now what I do is I use my thumbs and I push it up and I fold it over, but my dough was not working with me and it kept on going back to its original position and was not working. So, but if done correctly, you should be able to push it up and just roll it, and make sure you roll it tightly, as when you cut them, they will, if you do not roll them tightly, when you cut them, they'll open and they won't look pretty and they probably won't cook correctly. So just make sure you roll them tightly. And what I'm doing here is I'm just rolling them tightly and making sure they're all rolled up correctly. And make sure you push the sides together, as it will help keep the stability better. Now here I cut off and I already rolled all of them up. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use a pastry roller or a pizza cutter, and I'm going to mark 11. I'm going to mark 10 or 9. It makes about 10 to 12 rolls. So I'm going to mark 9 lines on my dough. And what I did, I cut off both sides as I don't need it. It just doesn't look right. So I mark them. Do not cut them with a pastry roller. I promise you it's easier. What I use, I go get dental floss. Dental floss is a lifesaver. It's literally a string and you just wrap it around, and I will show you. So what you do is you grab the dental floss and you put it under and you go back and forth in like a sawing motion, but make sure you're not cutting into the dough. You're trying to go under the dough. And you go on your marked lines, you wrap it around, and you pull in opposite directions. And you lift